The chamber stretched so far that its walls disappeared into a blue haze of distance. Thousands of seats rose in curved tiers, each occupied by a representative from one of the Galactic Council's member species. Some breathed oxygen like humans. Others sat in sealed environments filled with methane or chlorine. A few existed as pure energy contained in magnetic bottles. All of them had come to vote on a single question: what to do about humanity. Ambassador Ji-hoon Park stood in the center of the floor, alone. The isolation felt deliberate. For 300 years, humanity had been part of this community. They had traded, explored, and built alongside species from across the galaxy. Now Ji-hoon watched, as speaker after speaker rose to explain why Earth should be expelled. "The humans expand too quickly," said the Vornim representative, its translator converting clicking sounds into words. "They have colonized 40 systems in the time it takes our people to settle 3. They consume resources without consideration for others." A crystalline being from the Shalix cluster added its complaint. "They intervene in conflicts that do not concern them. They position themselves as protectors, but we did not ask for their protection. It is aggression disguised as charity." The accusations continued for hours. Humans were too loud, too bold, too willing to take risks. They questioned traditions that had stood for millennia. They made other species uncomfortable with their constant push for change. They refused to accept their place as a young species that should observe and learn rather than act and lead. Ji-hoon listened without interrupting. He had expected this. The signs had been building for years. Resentment at human trading posts on the frontier. Complaints about human security patrols in lawless sectors. Whispers that Earth's people acted as though they owned the galaxy rather than shared it. When the speeches ended, the vote was called. The chamber's central display showed the results in real time. Green lights for keeping humanity in the council. Red lights for expulsion. The red swept across the display like a wave of blood. Out of 3,247 member species, only 112 voted to keep Earth. The rest wanted humanity gone. The Council Primarch, an ancient being whose species had founded the Council 10,000 years ago, spoke the formal verdict. "By the authority granted to this assembly, humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Council. All human personnel must withdraw from shared territories within 30 standard days. All trade agreements are dissolved. All military cooperation ends immediately. This decision is final." Well won. It is Asian's fine. The chamber fell silent. Every eye, lens, and sensory organ focused on Ji-hoon, waiting for his response. They expected anger, perhaps threats, maybe desperate pleas for reconsideration. Human emotions were well known across the galaxy. Surely the ambassador would show them now. Ji-hoon simply bowed. "I acknowledge the verdict. Please provide the official documentation so Earth can proceed with an orderly withdrawal. Thank you for the 3 centuries of cooperation. I hope your futures are prosperous." He turned and walked toward the exit. Behind him, confused, murmuring filled the chamber. This was not the reaction they had anticipated. The Vornim representative called out, "Ambassador Park, do you have nothing more to say?" Ji-hoon paused at the doorway. "What more is there to say? You voted. We accept your decision. Democracy has spoken." Then he left. The news reached Earth at light speed, transmitted through the quantum communication network that humanity had built to connect its colonies. President Sarah Chen received Ji-hoon's report in her office overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. She read it twice, then sat in silence for several minutes. Her chief of staff, Marcus Webb, waited nervously. "What do we do, Madam President? Do we appeal? Try to negotiate?" Sarah shook her head. "No. They've made their position clear. Arguing would be undignified. We'll respect their decision." She activated her communication terminal and began drafting a statement. 2 hours later, every human in the galaxy received the same message. Sarah's face appeared on screens from Earth to the furthest colonies on the rim of explored space. Her expression was calm, almost peaceful. "Citizens of Earth and her colonies," she began. "Today, the Galactic Council voted to expel humanity from their community. This decision was made democratically and must be respected. Therefore, I am ordering the immediate implementation of Operation Exodus. All human personnel will withdraw from Galactic Council space within the mandated 30 days. All cooperation with Council species will cease. All shared facilities will be evacuated." She paused, and something like a smile touched her lips. "The galaxy has decided they don't want us. That's their right. But it's also our right to decide what comes next. We came to the stars as explorers and builders. We made ourselves valuable to the galactic community. We thought partnership mattered. Perhaps we were wrong. Or perhaps we simply don't need their approval as much as we thought we did." Sarah's eyes hardened with determination. "They've given us 30 days. We'll be gone in 20. Not because we're running away, but because we have better things to do than stay where we're not wanted. Operation Exodus begins now. All personnel, begin withdrawal procedures. No delays, no protests. We leave with dignity, and we leave completely." The broadcast ended. Across human space, the response was immediate. Diplomats packed their offices on council worlds. Traders closed their shops in alien markets. Scientists shut down joint research stations and uploaded their data to human-only servers. Security forces abandoned their patrol routes on the frontier, leaving regions they had protected for decades. The withdrawal was orderly, efficient, and silent. No human argued or complained. They simply packed, departed, and sealed their borders behind them. On the Council homeworld, Ambassador Thexlar of the Vornum Confederacy watched human ships leaving orbit in perfect formation. Something felt wrong. This was too calm, too controlled. Humans were supposed to be emotional, reactive. Where was the anger? Where were the threats? A junior diplomat approached. "Sir, should we monitor their withdrawal? Make sure they're complying?" Thexlar's antennae twitched with unease. "No. Something tells me they're complying perfectly. That's what worries me." He couldn't explain the feeling, but as he watched the last human transport disappear into the quantum corridor network, he had the distinct impression that the galaxy had made a terrible mistake, not because humanity would seek revenge, but because they wouldn't. They would simply leave. And the galaxy might not realize what it had lost until far too late. 6 months passed since humanity withdrew from galactic space. At first, the Council celebrated. The uncomfortable humans were gone. The galaxy could return to its proper order, where young species knew their place and ancient civilizations guided progress with wisdom earned over millennia. Then the problems began. Captain Rexall of the Pilan Commonwealth ran a small trading vessel between the frontier colonies. He had used the same route for 20 years, jumping through the quantum corridor network that made faster-than-light travel possible. The network was complex, built by dozens of species over thousands of years. But the most efficient routes, the ones that cut travel time by weeks, had all been constructed by humans in the past century. When Rexall tried to enter one of these corridors, his ship's navigation system returned an error. The corridor was gone. Not damaged. Not blocked. Simply gone. Collapsed back into normal space. He diverted to an alternate route, adding 12 days to his journey. The cargo of medical supplies he carried for a frontier hospital would arrive too late to save the patients who needed them. Rexall wasn't alone. Across the galaxy, traders found their routes disrupted. The humans hadn't just left the network. They had taken their technology with them, and every corridor they had built collapsed without maintenance. 40% of the galaxy's fastest trade routes vanished in a matter of months. Shipping costs doubled, then tripled. Goods that had moved freely between sectors now faced delays of weeks or months. The galactic economy, built on centuries of free-flowing commerce, began to slow. On the frontier world of Delaxis 7, Governor Miraval watched pirate ships approach her colony. For 30 years, human patrol vessels had kept these regions safe. The Council had never asked them to. Humans had simply started patrolling after a series of attacks on civilian ships, and they had done it so effectively that piracy had almost disappeared. Now the patrols were gone. The pirates had returned. Miraval sent desperate messages to the Council, begging for protection. The Council security force promised to send ships. They arrived 3 weeks later, long after the pirates had looted 2 settlements and disappeared back into deep space. The Council forces were stretched too thin, trying to cover regions that human ships had once protected. Attacks on frontier worlds increased by 300% in 6 months. Small colonies that had felt safe for decades now lived in fear. Some were abandoned entirely, their populations fleeing to more secure regions. The frontier began to shrink. At the Central Medical Research Station in the Antares sector, Dr. Cheval faced a crisis. The station served 200 species, treating diseases and manufacturing medicines for half the galaxy. 37 of their most critical medications were produced using processes developed by human scientists. The humans had shared the medicines freely, shipping them to any world that needed them, but they had never shared the manufacturing techniques. Those were proprietary, owned by human corporations that no longer operated in galactic space. Dr. Cheval had enough stockpiled medicine for 3 months. After that, millions of patients across the galaxy would go without treatment. She tried to contact human pharmaceutical companies. Her messages went unanswered. She tried to reverse engineer the manufacturing process. Her team made no progress. Human biochemistry was unique, and their approach to medicine was different from any other species. Without their cooperation, the techniques remained a mystery. On the Council homeworld, emergency sessions became routine. Representative after representative brought complaints and concerns. Trade was collapsing. Security was failing. Medical supplies were running short. Infrastructure that humans had maintained was falling apart. Projects that relied on human technology were abandoned. Ambassador Thexlar stood before the assembly with a proposal. We acted in haste. The expulsion was a mistake. I propose we send a delegation to Earth and negotiate new terms, perhaps limited membership, or an associate status that addresses our previous concerns. The Shalix representative objected. We voted to expel them. We cannot reverse that decision after only 6 months. It would make us appear weak and indecisive. Then we don't reverse it. Thexlar argued. We simply establish new diplomatic relations. As equals, negotiating a new relationship from a fresh start. The proposal passed. A delegation was selected and dispatched to the Sol system. They never arrived. Human border control met them at the edge of what had once been shared space, but was now clearly marked as human territory. Automated defense platforms and patrol ships created an impenetrable wall. The delegation received a recorded message. This is the border of the Terran concordat. Your delegation is not authorized to enter our space. If you wish to establish formal diplomatic contact, please submit a request through proper channels. We will review it and respond within a standard year. Until then, please respect our borders. The delegation returned, confused and frustrated. A standard year? For a simple meeting? The Council had never faced such treatment from any species, let alone one they had expelled just months ago. Ji Young Kim, a human who had been born in a Centauri colony and had remained in galactic space after the expulsion, requested to address the Council. She stood where Ji-hoon Park had stood 6 months earlier, but her expression held no sympathy. You wanted humans gone because we made you uncomfortable, she said. We reminded you that young species could achieve things you couldn't. That age didn't automatically equal wisdom. That maybe your way of doing things wasn't the only way, or even the best way. So you voted us out, and you expected us to beg for a second chance. She looked around the chamber. But humans don't beg. When you told us to leave, we left. Did you really think we'd wait around, hoping you'd change your minds? Did you think we needed you so badly that we'd come crawling back? The Vornum representative stood. We are trying to fix a mistake. Surely your people want to rejoin the galactic community. Ji-Yon laughed, and it was not a kind sound. Why? What do we gain? The privilege of being treated like children by species who haven't had a new idea in 1,000 years? The honor of being resented for every success? You taught us a valuable lesson, Council. We don't need you. We never did. We just thought we did. She turned to leave, then paused. My parents are on Earth. I talk to them every week. Do you want to know what they're doing? Building. Exploring. Establishing trade with species outside your influence. Colonizing new worlds. They're thriving. The question isn't whether humanity wants to rejoin the Council. The question is why we would want to. The chamber fell silent as Ji-Yon walked out. In that silence, the Council members began to understand. They hadn't expelled humanity. They had freed them, and humanity was doing just fine without them. Better than fine, actually. That was what made it terrifying. 2 years after the expulsion, the Galactic Council convened to review the state of the galaxy. The report was not encouraging. Economic output had decreased by 18%. Piracy rates had increased by 400%. 3 regional conflicts had escalated into full-scale wars. Medical crises affected 17 sectors. Infrastructure failures plagued frontier colonies. Every problem could be traced back to the same source. The absence of humanity. Nobody wanted to say it out loud, but the evidence was clear. For 300 years, humans had filled gaps in the galactic community that nobody else wanted to fill. They had built trade routes through dangerous space. They had patrolled regions too lawless for civilized species to bother with. They had developed solutions to problems that ancient species considered beneath their attention. Now those gaps were exposed. The galaxy had been dependent on humanity without realizing it. And humanity was gone. On the frontier world of Kesix Prime, a humanitarian crisis unfolded. War had broken out in the neighboring sector. Millions of refugees fled in whatever ships they could find. They headed toward what used to be human space, knowing the fastest escape route lay through those systems. The refugee fleet of 700 ships approached the border of the Terran concordat. They expected to pass through freely. Space was big, and the route would barely take them through 3 human systems. Surely humanity would allow refugees to escape danger. They were wrong. Human ships met them at the border. Not warships, but patrol vessels, clearly armed and ready. Captain Min Ji Song of the Border Patrol hailed the refugee fleet. This is Captain Song of the Terran Concordat Border Control. You are approaching sovereign human territory. Please state your intention. The refugee fleet leader, an elderly Pilan named Corvas, explained their situation. War, destruction, millions fleeing for their lives. They needed to pass through human space to reach safety. It would only take 3 days. Minji listened quietly. When Corvus finished, she responded in a voice that was not unkind, but absolutely firm. I'm sorry for your situation. War is terrible, but you cannot pass through our territory. These are our borders now, and we control who enters. Corvus couldn't believe what he was hearing. But people will die. We need the fastest route to safety. Your space is the only direct path. I understand, Minji said. My ships are transmitting alternate routes that will take you to safety through Galactic Council space. It will add 2 weeks to your journey. We're also providing supplies, medical aid, and fuel for your fleet. But you cannot enter our territory. 2 weeks? Corvus's voice broke. We have sick and wounded. We're almost out of supplies. 2 weeks might as well be an eternity. Minji's expression softened, but her words did not. Then I suggest you petition the Galactic Council for emergency assistance. They have ships, resources, and territory. They're your community. Not us. We were expelled, remember? We're not part of your mutual aid agreements anymore. The refugee fleet had no choice. They took the alternate route and the supplies Minji provided. Some ships didn't make it. The sick and elderly who might have survived a 3-day journey died in the extended 2-week crossing. When they finally reached safety, the survivors told their story. It spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Humanity had refused to help refugees. The council representatives who had complained about human intervention now complained about human indifference. The irony was lost on no one except them. In the council chamber, accusations flew. The humans have become cold and cruel, one representative declared. They watched refugees suffer and did nothing. Ji Young Kim, still serving as an observer, stood to respond. They did exactly what you wanted. You expelled humanity for being too involved in galactic affairs, for interfering where they weren't wanted, for acting as protectors when nobody asked them to. Now they're staying out of your business. And you're angry about that too? She shook her head in disgust. You can't have it both ways. Either humanity is part of your community and obligated to help, or they're separate and entitled to control their own borders. You chose separation. This is what it looks like. Meanwhile, Council intelligence had been gathering reports on human activity. What they found was deeply disturbing. Not because humans were preparing for war or seeking revenge, but because they were thriving. In 2 years, humanity had colonized 40 new worlds. They had established trade agreements with species outside the Council's sphere of influence. Many of them considered too primitive or too remote to matter. They had developed new technologies at a pace that defied logic. Most alarming was the formation of the Terran concordat. It wasn't just humanity anymore. 20 species had joined them. Small species, mostly, ones that had been minor members of the Council or had never joined at all. Species that the ancient civilizations had largely ignored. Now those species had access to human technology, human trade networks, and human protection. They were colonizing worlds, building infrastructure, and developing in ways they never had under Council guidance. The Concordat wasn't hostile to the Council. It simply didn't care about the Council. It existed in parallel, growing stronger while the Council's problems multiplied. Ambassador Thexlar reviewed the intelligence reports with growing alarm. They're building an alternative to us. A competing power structure. His aide corrected him. Not competing, sir. Ignoring. They're acting as if we don't exist. That's somehow worse. Thexlar had to agree. Competition implied that the Council still mattered. This was dismissal. Humanity had moved on. He tried again to establish formal contact. He sent diplomatic messages through every channel he could find. Most went unanswered. A few received form responses directing him to submit formal requests through proper channels and wait for review. One message received a personal response from Ji-hoon Park himself. Ambassador Thexlar, I remember you. You were one of the few who questioned the expulsion vote. I appreciated that. But your council made a decision, and we accepted it. We're not angry. We're not seeking revenge. We're simply busy building our own future. When, and if, we're ready to establish formal diplomatic relations with the Galactic Council, we'll let you know. Until then, please respect our borders and our autonomy. We're doing the same for you. It was polite. It was respectful. It was also a clear dismissal. Humanity had no interest in reconciliation. In the depths of space, construction crews built new quantum corridors connecting human worlds and concordat systems. They bypassed galactic space entirely, creating a network that was faster and more efficient than what the Council used. Human engineers had learned from their experience building the old network. This new one had no flaws, no dependencies on other species' technology. Trade flowed through the concordat like blood through a healthy body. Species that had been poor under the Council's patronizing guidance found prosperity through fair partnership with humanity. Nobody claimed to be superior. Nobody insisted on ancient privileges. Success was earned through capability, not age. On Earth, President Sarah Chen met with her cabinet to discuss the state of the concordat. We've exceeded every projection. Our growth rate is 3 times what we achieved under the Council. Our technology advances without political barriers. Our people are proud of what we're building. Her chief of staff smiled. We're proving that we didn't need them. Sarah shook her head. We're not alone. We're in a community of equals, not a hierarchy of the ancient and the tolerated. That's the difference. The Council didn't just expel us. They showed us that we'd been accepting less than we deserved. They gave us permission to stop trying to fit in and start building something better. She looked at the star map showing concordat space expanding across the galaxy. They think they expelled us. The truth is, they set us free. 3 years after humanity's expulsion, the Krathex Dominion decided it had waited long enough. One of the Council's most powerful military forces, the Krathex had watched the chaos unfold with calculating patience. Now they saw opportunity. The frontier regions that humanity once protected were lawless and vulnerable. Small species struggled to defend themselves. The Council's security forces were stretched impossibly thin. Nobody could stop the Krathex from taking what they wanted. Supreme Commander Vectrix addressed his fleet. The humans maintained order through strength. They left a vacuum, and vacuums must be filled. We will bring these regions under proper governance. Our governance. The Krathex fleet moved into the frontier, system by system. They didn't attack civilian targets. They didn't need to. They simply announced that each system was now under Krathex protection, and anyone who disagreed could face their warships. Most colonies surrendered without firing a shot. The Pilon Commonwealth found itself directly in the Krathex path. Their small defense force was no match for Dominion battleships. Governor Miraval, the same leader whose world had been raided by pirates 2 years earlier, made a desperate decision. She sent a secret message to the Terran Concordat. Not to the Council, not to other Council species, to humanity. The species that had been expelled, the species that had refused to help refugees 2 years ago. Ambassador Jae-Sung Choi received her in a stark meeting room on a border station. Miraval noticed immediately how different this was from Council diplomatic facilities. No luxury, no displays of wealth or ancient glory. Just functional space for conducting business. Ambassador Choi, she began. My people face annihilation. The Krathex fleet will reach our homeworld in 3 weeks. We're asking for help. Jae-Sung studied her quietly. The Galactic Council has military forces. Have you asked them? We have. They're debating what to do. The debate will take months. We have weeks. Miraval leaned forward. I know what happened with the refugees. I know you turned them away. But I'm not asking you to let us pass through your territory. I'm asking you to help us defend ours. Why? Jae-Sung asked simply. Why should we? Your people voted to expel us. You're part of the community that decided we were too aggressive, too interventionist. Now you want us to intervene? Miraval had expected this. Because it's the right thing to do. Because my people will die if nobody helps. Because somewhere under that wall you've built, humanity still cares about justice. She paused. And because if you don't, the Krathex will control everything up to your borders. Then they'll test those borders. And then you'll have a war anyway. Jae-Sung didn't respond immediately. He stood and walked to a window showing the stars. 3 years ago, humanity was expelled for being too willing to help species like yours. For inserting ourselves into situations that weren't our business. The galaxy made it very clear that our protection wasn't wanted. I know, Miraval said quietly. We were wrong. Yes, you were. Jae-Sung turned back to her. But we're not the Galactic Council. We don't hold grudges, and we don't abandon people who genuinely ask for help. The difference is, we're not doing this because we're part of your community anymore. We're doing it because you asked us directly, as equals. without expecting that we owed you anything. Hope flared in Miraval's chest. Then you'll help? I'll present your request to President Chen. But understand something. If we help, there will be conditions. We're not coming to save you and then leaving while you go back to the council. If we fight for you, you join the concordat. You leave the council permanently and become part of our alliance. We protect our own, but you have to be willing to become our own. Miraval didn't hesitate. Yes. Anything. We accept. 1 week later, the Krathex fleet approached the Pelon homeworld. They expected easy submission. Instead, they found human warships in orbit. Not many. Just 12 vessels. But they were positioned in a defensive formation that clearly said, leave or fight. Commander Vectrix couldn't believe it. The humans? Here? They're not part of the council anymore. This isn't their concern. His tactical officer checked the data. Sir, the Pelon Commonwealth has joined the Terran Concordat. They're formally aligned with humanity now. Those ships are defending Concordat territory. 8M. Vectrix considered his options. He had 80 warships to humanity's 12. But he'd seen the intelligence reports on human military capability. And they had spent 3 years advancing their technology without council oversight or limitations. Those 12 ships might be equal to his entire fleet. He opened a channel. Human Commander, you are interfering in council space. The Pelon system falls within territory governed by Galactic Council regulations. Commander Seojun Park responded calmly. The Pelon Commonwealth withdrew from the council yesterday. They are now sovereign members of the Terran Concordat. You are threatening Concordat space. Cast. That makes this our concern. You were expelled from the council. You have no authority here. Exactly, Seojun agreed. We have no authority in council space. But this isn't council space anymore. It's Concordat space. And we absolutely have authority here. You have 2 options. Withdraw peacefully, or test our defenses. Choose carefully. Vectrix studied the tactical display. The human ships were positioned perfectly. They had the high ground, better firing angles, and defensive platforms that had appeared in the last week. This wouldn't be an easy victory. It might not be a victory at all. But his pride wouldn't let him back down completely. We will withdraw from this system, but we are already established in 7 systems nearby. Will you challenge all of those? Only if you push closer to our borders. You can keep what you've already taken. That's council territory, and it's not our problem. But if you advance 1 light-year closer to Concordat space, we'll consider it an act of war. We don't want war with the Krathex Dominion. But we will defend our territory and our allies, absolutely. Vectrix made his decision. He ordered his fleet to pull back. As they withdrew, he sent one final message. You've changed, humans. You used to protect everyone, whether they wanted it or not. Seojun's response was flat. We used to. Then the galaxy told us to stop. So we did. Now we only protect those who choose to stand with us. The council taught us that lesson. Thank them for us. The news spread through both the council and the concordat. Humanity had drawn a line and enforced it. They weren't the galaxy's protectors anymore. They were their own protectors, and the protectors of those who joined them. 3 more species formally withdrew from the council and requested admission to the concordat within the next month. Not because they feared the Krathex, because they wanted to be where strength, protection, and fair partnership existed together. In the council chamber, panic was setting in. If this continues, we'll lose half our members within a year, one representative warned. Ambassador Thexlar stood before them. Then perhaps we should ask ourselves why they're leaving. What does the Concordat offer that we don't? The Shalix representative knew the answer but couldn't say it. The Concordat offered what humanity had always offered. Protection, without condescension. Partnership, without hierarchy. Progress without tradition's stranglehold. And the confidence that came from building something new rather than maintaining something old. The council was ancient, wise, and dying. The concordat was young, bold, and growing, and they had humanity to thank for both situations. 5 years after the expulsion vote, the Galactic Council formally requested a summit with the Terran Concordat. Not to invite humanity back, not to apologize, simply to establish formal diplomatic relations between two separate powers that shared the galaxy. The request took 6 months to process through proper channels. When approval finally came, the meeting was scheduled at a neutral station on the border between Council and Concordat space. The contrast between the two delegations was striking. The Council sent 15 representatives from its oldest and most prestigious species. They arrived in ships decorated with symbols of ancient glory. They wore formal robes and carried ceremonial items representing thousands of years of civilization. They expected gravitas and ceremony. The Terran Concordat sent 5 people. President Min Seo Lee led them, flanked by Ambassador Jae Sung Choi and 3 advisors. They wore simple suits. They brought data pads and documents. They acted like people arriving for a business meeting, not a historic negotiation. Ambassador Thexlar led the council delegation. He had pushed for this meeting for years, over the objections of prouder species who thought any outreach to humanity showed weakness. Now, facing President Min Seo across a conference table, he understood that pride had been the council's greatest enemy all along. President Lee, thank you for meeting with us. Thexlar began formally. We come seeking to establish new relations between our peoples. The galaxy has changed significantly in 5 years. We believe cooperation would benefit both our communities. Min Seo smiled politely. It was not a warm smile. Ambassador Thexlar, I appreciate your directness. Let me be equally direct. We're willing to establish formal diplomatic relations, trade agreements, border recognition, standard protocols for contact between our peoples. But if you're here hoping we'll rejoin the council, we're not interested. The Shalix representative spoke up. Surely your people miss being part of the galactic community. You were members for 300 years. We were, Min Seo agreed. And during those 300 years, we were constantly reminded that we were too young, too aggressive, too different. Every success was viewed with suspicion. Every offer to help was questioned. Every innovation was treated as a threat to the natural order. She leaned back in her chair. Do you know what we've accomplished in 5 years outside the council? More than we did in 3 centuries inside it. She activated a display showing statistics. We've colonized 73 new worlds. The council has established 12 new colonies in the same period. Our technology has advanced at twice the rate we achieved under council regulations. Our economy has grown by 40%. 23 species have joined the concordat, and every one of them reports higher quality of life than they had under council membership. Thexlar studied the numbers. They were devastating. You're saying the council held you back? No, Min Seo corrected. I'm saying you held yourselves back, and you wanted us to do the same. You built a community based on the supremacy of ancient species and the subordination of young ones. You created a hierarchy where age mattered more than capability. We didn't fit that model, and instead of changing the model, you removed us from it. Another council representative, a being of pure energy from the celestial collective, pulsed with indignation. We offered you the wisdom of civilizations that have endured for millennia. You offered us stagnation wrapped in tradition. Min Seo replied without hesitation. You mistook age for wisdom and tradition for truth. You forgot that young species aren't inferior. We're just different. We see problems you've grown blind to. We ask questions you stopped asking millennia ago. We push boundaries you've accepted as permanent. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. 5 years ago, when you expelled us, I was angry. I thought it was unjust. Now I'm grateful. You gave us something precious. You gave us permission to stop trying to fit into a system that was never designed for us. You freed us to build something better. Thexlar found himself without a prepared response. This wasn't going as he'd expected. "What do you want from this meeting, President Lee?" "Simple diplomatic relations," she said, turning back to face him. "Recognition of our borders, trade on equal terms, non-interference in each other's internal affairs. We won't challenge your authority in council space. We ask that you respect our sovereignty in concordat space. We can coexist peacefully, without being part of the same community. And if we want more, cooperative projects, joint security arrangements, shared scientific research," Minseo returned to her seat. "Then propose specific projects, and we'll evaluate them on their merits. But understand something crucial. We're not coming back. We're not going to slowly rebuild the old relationship until we're subordinate members of your community again. We're equals now. Or we're nothing." The Shalix representative couldn't contain itself. "Equals? You're a 5-year-old confederation compared to our 10,000-year-old council. On what basis do you claim equality?" Ambassador Jae-sung Choi spoke for the first time. "On the basis that we don't need you. You need age and glory and ancient authority, because without them, you're just another group of species struggling with the same problems everyone faces. We have capability. We have results. We have a growing community that chose us over you. That's the basis of our equality." The conference room fell silent. The truth was uncomfortable, but nobody could argue with it. The concordat was thriving. The council was declining. In 5 years, the balance of power had shifted more than anyone would have believed possible. Thexlar made a decision. "Very well. Equal diplomatic relations. Separate communities with formal protocols for interaction. Is there anything else you want from us?" Minseo consulted briefly with her advisors, then responded. "Yes. Stop telling species they can't join the concordat. We've received complaints that the council threatens economic sanctions against members who consider leaving. That's not diplomacy. That's hostage-taking. Let species choose freely where they want to belong. And if they all choose the concordat?" the Celestial Collective representative asked. "If your success continues and our membership dwindles, then maybe you should ask yourselves why," Minseo said simply. "Maybe you should wonder if a system based on ancient privilege deserves to survive. Maybe you should consider that the galaxy is big enough for multiple communities, and competition makes everyone better." She gathered her data pads. "We don't want the council to fail. We're not seeking to replace you or destroy you. We're just building an alternative for species who want something different. If that threatens you, the problem isn't us. It's your inability to adapt." The summit concluded with formal agreements. Borders were recognized. Trade protocols were established. Both sides agreed to respect each other's sovereignty. It was cordial, professional, and completely unsentimental. As the council delegation prepared to depart, Thexlar approached Minseo privately. "Do your people hold a grudge against the council for expelling you?" Minseo considered the question. "No. We made our peace with it years ago. You made a democratic decision. We respected it. We just also decided we were better off on our own. You taught us an important lesson, Ambassador. We spent 300 years trying to earn your approval, trying to prove we belonged in your community. The expulsion freed us from that need. We don't need the galaxy's approval to have value. We don't need to be part of your community to matter." She extended her hand in the human gesture of farewell. Thexlar took it awkwardly with his manipulator appendages. "Sometimes," she continued, "the best response to rejection isn't to fight it or beg for reconsideration. It's to build something better and move on. You gave us that gift, even though you didn't mean to. So no, we don't hold a grudge. We're too busy building our future to worry about the past." 10 years after the expulsion, Ji-hoon Park sat in his office at the University of New Terra. He had retired from diplomatic service years ago and now taught history to students from a dozen species. A young Pilan student approached him after class. "Professor Park, you were there when the council expelled humanity. Do you regret how things turned out?" Ji-hoon looked out the window at the bustling colony below. Ships from 20 different species moved through the orbital traffic. Students from across the concordat walked the campus paths. The quantum corridor network hummed with trade and travel. Everything was new, vibrant, and growing. "Do I regret it?" he repeated. "No. The council gave us a gift, even though they didn't mean to. They gave us permission to stop trying to fit in and start being ourselves. They removed the burden of their expectations. We discovered we didn't need their approval to thrive. That's a lesson worth learning." He turned back to his student. "The galaxy didn't want us. That was their right. But we didn't need them as much as they thought we did. As much as we thought we did. Sometimes the best thing that can happen is being forced to stand on your own. You find out what you're really capable of." The student nodded thoughtfully. "My people joined the concordat 3 years ago. Life is better now than it ever was in the council." "I'm glad," Ji-hoon said sincerely. "That's what we're building here. Not a replacement for the council. Just an alternative. A place where species are judged by what they contribute, not how old they are. Where innovation matters more than tradition. Where partnership means equality, not hierarchy." He smiled. "The council will endure. They've lasted 10,000 years. They'll last 10,000 more. But so will we. And maybe, centuries from now, they'll realize that what happened wasn't a failure. It was evolution. The galaxy grew big enough for different ways of living together. That's not tragedy. That's progress." The student left, and Ji-hoon returned to his work. Outside, the sun set over New Terra, painting the sky in colors Earth's sun had never produced. It was a different world, a different life, a different future than anyone had imagined 5 years ago, but it was theirs. Built by their choices, their work, their refusal to accept that rejection meant failure. The galaxy had voted to expel Earth. Humanity hadn't waited to be told twice. They had left, built something better. That, Ji-hoon thought, was the most human response possible.